Hey folks, welcome to week 1 of Novel Bootcamp, where we're going to take you from idea to finished draft of a brand new novel in this 12-week course. Let's get going. Here's a list of all the free classes that are coming up. So we have in WordCamp on the right, all these things written in teal are the upcoming free classes. So we have today, which is prose and premise, looking at novels in our week 1 class today. And then we have on March 8th, there's going to be a query letter class. So that is going to be looking at successful queries that have gotten representation based or for the writers that have written them. And we're also going to look at queries as kind of an organization tool for understanding the story of a whole book. And then we're going to expand on that in our outlining class, which is going to be on the 16th. We're going to be talking outlining throughout the Novel Bootcamp, but that is just a sort of a one-off free class that will help you learn these fundamentals of planning and plotting an entire book. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see these are the Script Camp classes, because WordCamp is just part of Skill Camp, which includes other Discord servers. Our screenwriting classes our screenwriting community is our biggest one. And we have classes multiple times a week over on Script Camp. So you can check out that new session of pilot writing March 5th at 11 a.m. That's going to be part of that TV pilot bootcamp that's going to run Sundays 11 to 1 for 6 weeks. We have the first class of that, which is also free. That's going to be Sunday, March 12th at 11, and running on Sundays for the rest of the month. Then we have a Best Protagonist class that's going to be on March 23rd at 6 p.m. These times are all in Pacific. Okay, so come by Script Camp, and definitely come by all of our other servers too. We are a writing community that's focused on helping take you from concept to idea to from taking your concept from idea to more polished manuscript, with lots of free classes, events, and workshops. And we have some paid as well, like the remainder of this bootcamp, which you should sign up for if you'd like to advance beyond this class and continue developing this idea with these 2-hour weekly sessions. You should sign up. You can sign up for all of our different classes, every event, every workshop, every course. If you go to scriptcamp.net, you can there go to membership and scroll down to start free trial, and you'll get 2 weeks access to absolutely everything we do on all of our different servers. So that will include not just novel writing, but will include screenwriting, coding and programming, animation, and many other classes that we have yet to add. So plenty of topics, over 100 hours of events and classes per month. So start your free trial, scriptcamp.net, or you can buy yearly and save 40%. Here's just a little about me. I am a screenwriter and novelist, though I haven't yet been published in novels. I've been working as a paid Hollywood writer since 2017, and have been featured in sections of the annual hit list, the Young and Hungry list. I have a thriller script that's set up at a production company in town, and I teach the boot camps and weekly writers' labs. So I'm a very active novelist, though I've not yet been published. Have written 5 novels total and countless screenplays and teleplays. I come from this world of playwriting and screenwriting, and came a little later to writing novels, but I've just realized how much more control you have over the ultimate result of your vision in a book, and how much you control the work of art as a whole. So like when you're writing for scripts, when you're writing spec features and TV pilots, you are doing 2 things. One, you're saying, first of all, very few people will ever read this. Because not that many people read scripts, and it kind of sucks to be a writer and not get read by that many people. Like, you have 3 or 4 guys that will read your script, and then, like, that's it. And so, after enough years of that, it might be nice to actually get a larger readership, I figured. So that was one reason I really was attracted to writing novels instead. Other things that attracted me to it were the fact that you retain much more control over it in terms of just the artistic expression. You don't have as many voices that are trying to give you notes and change things about it, whereas if you are writing a movie or show, you are essentially giving over control to other people. You become an employee working on a project that has the title of your script, but you are not the final voice. You no longer have the final say. So I kind of like that fact in books, that you have the final say. You still have to do revisions, and you still might get developmental guidance from both your agent and then the publisher, but it's not going to be like tons of notes from tons of people, and I enjoy that because I'm a typical arrogant writer, hate getting notes. And then another nice thing about books is that you can kind of explore more ideas. Books are so much about ideas and are so good at exploring things that movies and TV shows can't do as much, like making connections between ideas and kind of going off in different topics, Or if you look at a Neil Stephenson book, for instance, or a book like Snow Crash, where you can write a really cool cyberpunk action story, but also just make it about so many more things than a movie could be. Like Snow Crash is about language and culture and the internet and like all these ideas that are packed into it. And you can really pack ideas into a book in a cool way that you can't do in a movie. With a movie, you have to stop at a certain point. You stop adding things. Whereas a book is sort of a much freer playground for you to try different stuff out and be weird and experimental, and people will follow you almost anywhere. And the nice thing is it doesn't require a huge budget to realize as well. The fact that a low-budget movie is taking millions and millions of dollars to make puts a huge barrier of entry on doing that professionally, doesn't it? Whereas if you are writing books, then it's not going to require millions more dollars to write an explosion than it is to write two people talking in a room. It's going to take the exact same amount of ink. And so that's a nice thing about it, is that you can get as huge as you want. You don't have to ever worry about budgetary concerns, number of cast of characters. You can have as big a cast as you want, basically. And we don't have to worry about locations or what's physically possible in the world. You can write things like fantasy and sci-fi, which are actually really tough to get going as an original property in screenwriting, because nobody wants to invest in these unproven or untested ideas, so to speak. So in books, you have room to explore and to sort of show people what's possible and to create and to forge your own path and to just try different things. So I think that it's worth trying even if you want to ultimately, if you see yourself writing movies and TV, writing books as well will allow you to create intellectual property, IP, which is seen as so valuable and so much more valuable than a simple spec on its own. So if you wanted to write, for instance, sci-fi, fantasy, big horror, big stories, or high-budget things, and anything that's not, low-budget horror, thriller, or drama or comedy, which are kind of considered the entry points for writing scripts for a lot of people, because those are the things that don't require huge budgets to pull off necessarily. With books, the world is your oyster, and you can do whatever you want. Those are the things that made me want to try out novels and learn how to do this. Even though it is a very different skill set in some ways, there's a lot that we can carry over between screenwriting and novel writing, and a lot of that is going to come down to structure, which we're not talking about today as much, but in the coming weeks, we will be getting into, for instance, what is a whole book skeleton going to look like truncated down to just a page? Or what is that same summary going to look like truncated to 3 pages or 5 pages? And we have to be able to pre-write an outline in many different shapes. Through the course of this class, we're going to be teaching a couple things. Today, we're looking at the fundamentals of prose, tense, viewpoint, and just these basic elements of choosing what you're going to make and how you're going to present that story to the world. And then, in addition to that, we can talk about things like structure and organization. What does a 3-act story look like, and should your book be in 3 acts? How can we make sure that we're fulfilling the promises that we're setting up, paying off all of these questions that we're answering all the questions that we're setting up, paying off the expectations that the audience has for us, and doing that in such a shape that it is really digestible and it feels well paced, it feels well plotted, and it feels like the right things are happening at the right times, basically. So that's kind of the 2 different skills of novel writing. There's executing just words on the page, which is mostly what today is about. And then there's organizing scenes and turning the simple, good writing into a narrative. The difference being that just good writing on its own is going to come down to things like syntax, word choice, good command of things like grammar and sentence structure, and just the vocabulary. And how you arrange those things on the page, that's its own huge skill, very, very important skill set. And then separate from that is, how do I connect these events so it feels like we're building to something, and there's a point to this, and there's a catalyst that incites the events of the story, and all these things that are just related to structure. So yeah, we have writing and we have the structure, and you combine those things together, and that's the skills that are required to write books. We have other skills attached to that, like marketing yourself, writing the query, and getting an agent, and all that stuff. But at the core of this, the most important thing to focus on is those 2 things: writing on the page and plotting and constructing of narrative. Those are kind of the fundamentals here. So if you've not yet signed up but you plan to, you can check the chat. You'll see that there's a poll with some blue numbers, and if you click that number 1, that will indicate you plan to sign up but have not yet done so, and will give you instant access to all of our member-exclusive chat channels. Here's a reminder/summary of the upcoming boot camps. We have features, Fridays at 6. That one has already started, but it's not too late to join. We have novels, 12 to 2. That's this time slot on Saturdays for the next 12 weeks. And then we have Pilot Bootcamp that is starting March 5th. That's tomorrow, 11 to 1 on Sundays for the next 6 weeks. And again, by signing up for Script Camp, you get access to all of these. Everything, and even the classes we didn't even tell you about yet. So you should become a supporting member, get access to all our boot camps and labs from just $29 a month with that yearly discount. You can volunteer as well if you know a skill or language you'd like to teach. We're trying to get these other Discord communities up and running with lots of events happening all the time. So Lingo Camp is for learning languages. We haven't had any classes on there yet. I'd love to get that started because I think this model works really well for language type instruction. So check out these other servers and refer your friends. If you are a member and you refer somebody, you'll both get a free month of unlimited subscription and also a free month of Arc Studio Pro, which is a great screenwriting software. Okay, let's look at the agenda for today. We'll start on prose and premise, and we're looking at developing the logline for your book. So you're trying to figure out, what on earth am I writing? We are going to start filling out our sketchbook of ideas even further, and that's something that we can be developing all throughout the course of writing the book. Like, you never really need to put the sketchbook down. There's never a time when the sketchbook is done. It's a place to collect all your ideas. And we're going to be doing that paragraph assignment today, so just looking at what is your voice like, how can we maybe fix it if there's just some like basic misunderstandings or mistakes on the page that are manifesting already. How can we correct those and just give you that early feedback to make sure that we're on the right track? You don't have to share your paragraph if you don't want to, but if you're concerned that something about your style might be off or might need a little work, then today's a day for that. I'm not going to go over all the rest of these, but you can see the upcoming agenda here. Week 2 is going to be more on loglines, so we're going to try to have a finished logline by the end of next class, but we're going to work on that as much as we can today. We're doing characters on week 3, world building week 4, outlining weeks 5 and 6, and then from there on we are writing the book, and every week you'll be writing. Assuming you're writing a 70 to 100,000 word book, you're going to be writing about 10,000 words a week, which is my personal goal, and it's my personal rate that I try to maintain. You don't have to write something that long, and if you are writing something shorter than a traditionally sized and traditionally published novel, you might have a lower word count goal per week, and that is fine too. The first draft is intended to be done by May 27th. So if you still need to enroll, you can either buy the course on its own at scriptcamp.net/classes, or you can start that free trial, unlimited membership, scriptcamp.net/membership. Okay, so let's, oh yeah, and of course you can get, if you want more feedback from me, you can order consultations or evaluations off the website, including logline consultation, in like brainstorming, if you just are trying to figure out an idea or just talk something through. You can get consultation on the entire script or just on your first chapter. There's lots of options, so check that out at scriptcamp.net/coverage if you want me to just analyze your book. Okay, week 1 overview. So, we are not going to do the paragraph assignment first thing, but we will get to that later today. We're going to start pretty early on with our genre poll. So we're going to ask, what is everybody writing? And I want to make sure that everyone knows what genre they're writing in, and they know the basics of how that genre works. We shouldn't be picking a genre that you've never read before, or that you've never watched before, and that you're not a fan of, because then you just simply won't know the rules and the expectations and what to do. So we need to make sure that we're familiar with the rules and the tropes and things like that from your genre. You can tell us about what you've read, because I'm asking every week. We come in and say, what have you been reading lately? Ideally, it should be the same sort of thing that you're writing. So if you're writing a novel, you should be reading from a novel, and every week you can give us an update on what you thought of the last section. I also listed some novelettes and some suggestions for shorter works in last week's class, so maybe some people read some of those and they have some comments on that they'd like to share. So every week, that's going to be our check-in. We're going to ask, what have you been reading? And we're going to ask about your updates and your progress on your book itself. So we're going to look at a breakdown of text. We're going to look at a paragraph from we're going to look at several paragraphs from published authors. We're going to be looking at complex paragraphs and simple paragraphs, and how different ideas are expressed and like the different ways we can present those ideas. We're going to be breaking down and giving commentary on a section from Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. We're going to look at some H.P. Lovecraft and a little Cormac McCarthy, so that should be fun. We are doing parts of speech and just English class fundamental stuff today, like paragraphs, guiding ideas, and complexity of thought. So we're going to be breaking down what is a paragraph and how does it work. These just simple questions like, what am I doing on the page? We're going to look at tense and POV, which are you're choosing between essentially first, second, or third person. Usually it's first or third. Don't pick second unless you're a crazy person. And then we have past or present tense. Obviously, you don't pick future tense unless, again, you are a crazy person. But there's, occasional reasons why you might want to use those things in very controlled ways. But basically, past or present, first or third are your essential options. And then we have other sort of nuances to that too, such as omniscient versus limited, points of view, and narrator characters. So we have lots of ways to present the stories that we are telling. And at some point we will do the, I'm not exactly sure where it's going to fall in the class yet, but I think it will be at the end of our first hour. So in about 40 minutes, we're going to do the paragraph assignment. So if you're still fiddling with yours, just expect to copy and paste it into our chat by about 1 p.m. Okay. So let's get going. Before we do anything else, if you've not yet made a sketchbook, you should do that. So this is a blank new Google document where you're going to keep and organize all your ideas and questions and notes for the project as you develop it. So there's no template to this. There's nothing to download for this. Just go to Google Docs or your other word processor thing, but I recommend Google Docs. And just open up a blank new one, and at the top you might just put the title of your book if you know it already, or you can put Untitled Action Adventure Book or whatever it is at the very top. You're going to use that to keep all your ideas. We don't want to have a bunch of different documents for this. We don't want to have ideas written on sticky notes all over your house. We want to organize and collate all those ideas in the same place so that we know where to look, and we're going to just move through a very simple evolution of documents. We're going to start with the sketchbook, then we move to story beats, then we move to scene cards, then we move to pages. So we're going to try to keep that as regimented as possible and try to build a process, and whether this process works for you or not, like, you can at least figure out what does work for you or what doesn't work for you. And by just trying out a process, you will at the very least get to the end of the book. I mean, that's the important thing, is that it doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It's not, you're not going to knock it out of the park on the very first try. I definitely didn't knock it out of the park on my very first try. My first books were terrible. My first probably 3 books were terrible. I think they only started to get okay as of like last year, when I wrote the first book that I was actually pretty proud of, which was called The Dreadful Edgar Bonesworth, which I really enjoyed. And I've written one since then, but that, to me, it took me like 4 or 5 tries to start to kind of write something that I would consider myself proud of, and I did a good job, and maybe you can actually query that. And I have queried Bonesworth, and although I haven't gotten any requests for the book yet, like, they've all been rejected so far, I have gotten at least a few comments from the agents that have read it and been like, although this wasn't for me, this was really, there's something about this, the voice and this character, that really is clicking and connecting. So I feel that's a good sign, and you should just think of that as a small victory, and just look for the small victories where you can find them. If you get a personalized response from an agent, for instance, then that is a sign that something is working. Most agents do not do that. They just send a form rejection back. All this is to say, it's really hard to get good at this. So just we want to not let our fear of not doing a good job hold us back from getting the words down and getting the work done. And if you want this to especially be your career, we should look to be writing novels on the time frame of at least one of them a year, or one every other year. As some people say, it's like, if you can knock out a really, really good novel every other year, you can have a career and make a living doing that. If you can write one incredibly good novel that people really respond to, you never really need to write another one. In fact, that maybe you're Harper Lee and you just write one book that's a huge hit and you want to stop there. That is feasible, but it typically takes a bunch of books to get to the point where you are actually writing something of the quality that would be your, To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever. Don't let the fear of low quality hold you back from this, and use this sketchbook to kind of just write down everything, even the bad ideas, even the half-formed, not very good ideas, and get used to sharing ideas even at these very early stages, because it can be, it's challenging enough to hear notes at any stage. And I know it's tough to hear them at the beginning, and to maybe hear something about your premise, the basics of your premise just maybe isn't quite working yet. But you have to try to get used to this, and although, like I mentioned, in books you are less answerable to a committee of other people giving you notes, that still does happen, and you still have an agent that's going to want to do revisions with you, or maybe they even give you a revise and resubmit, which is sort of saying, if you make changes to this book, then I would consider repping it and repping you. So you have to be open to the idea of doing revisions and getting notes, even in the world of novels, though it is markedly less significant than the amount of this you would do in screenwriting. That's a couple of the basics. There's a few more basics here, but we often say, after the first class, we request that you use your real name instead of a screen name. So for this one, you're fine. You can use whatever screen name you want. But if you continue in a bootcamp, we recommend that you use a real name or your pseudonym or your nickname or something like that if you want to. So let's start with this question. Tell us about yourself. Favorite books, favorite authors, what have you written? What do you want to write? What are your goals as a writer? Anyone can feel free to either type in the text or raise your hand and speak. For anyone looking, the buttons should be at the bottom row of your screen next to the mute and the camera icon. Coming up, Amanda. Caller, you're on. I'm going to start doing relationship advice. I think I've invited you. Can you hear me, Amanda? There you are.
Oh, how weird. Okay, this is very strange. So basically you invite somebody, we go on stage, and then we can talk?
Yeah, it's a stage channel.
Okay, cool. I've never tried this before. So can you repeat the question again?
It's right behind me. Just tell us about yourself. What have you written? What are you writing?
Okay.
What are your goals?
Sure. So I was in this novel Bootcamp last year, and I wrote very detailed scene cards and, kind of a very loose first draft. And it's kind of the first time I feel like I've written a really well-structured story. Interestingly, it happens to be a novel. I wish it was a short story kind of, because it would be, it's just every iteration of the novel is, takes a while. But so in this boot camp, I'm going to be working on the second draft of it and just getting down my prose, building it out, and fixing plot holes that are going to inevitably come up. Every time I tweak something in the end, it opens up a hole in the beginning, and so it's like a iterative kind of massaging or kneading of the dough kind of thing.
Sure.
And other than that, I've written a lot of like blog kind of nonfiction things, and then I've written a lot of really short rhyming stories and a couple scripts, and a couple outlines for scripts, which to me is like the hardest thing to do, one of the hardest things to do. So I know it doesn't sound like much, but and then I'm working on another pilot now, which I'm really excited about. It might be competing with this second draft, so I'm going to have to figure that out. So,
yeah, got to be careful with the.
I know. One of them's gonna. I don't know. I kind of got to do what's most exciting for me, and they're both. None of them are shiny object syndrome. The pilot is like I burned down an original pilot and rewriting it from scratch, but it's not like shiny object syndrome where it's like a totally new show. It's just, it's up there with priorities. So we'll see.
That makes sense. Yeah, it can be a little easier.
Oh, and fantasy.
Go ahead. Sorry?
Oh, just my genre's fantasy,
right.
Young adult, middle grade. I like kids shows that are kind of easy to, like Dragon Prince and Avatar, The Last Airbender, that, that can be appreciated by adults and stuff. So,
right.
Sorry, go ahead about what you're going to just say.
I was just going to say that if I normally recommend to write, just for anyone wondering, to write one thing at a time. But if you're balancing something like two rewrites together, that can be a little easier because you already have the foundation. So it's not going to like require the same amount or type of brain power as it would be to write two things from scratch. So
That's a good
hopping
point.
hopping between rewrites is a little easier because the major fence posts are already in place.
Yeah, good point. Yep, yep. And actually, this other one, I might be a little bit more in like outlining phase, whereas this one I have outlined it, and so I'm putting down prose, so they'll be very different mindsets. So
Right,
yeah.
right.
And
So,
one's a script, one's a novel. So yeah.
right, exactly. It can be, yeah, it's easier to jump between those than I would say two. Like writing two novels at once would be crazy, but some people somehow make that work. And like for instance, Bradbury, when Bradbury was writing, he would just have like a filing cabinet full of different short stories that are like half finished, and every day he would just like pick one and be like, oh, I guess I'm working on this today. And I can't fathom that, but that somehow some people can just do that, just swap between all these different ideas.
I do that with my drawing. So I do a lot of drawing and a little bit of comic stripping. And obviously it's very different to switch between drawings than to write because it's such a meditative process and I don't use brain power really.
Right.
You know, or just it's a different kind of meditative thing. And but yeah, I can't imagine having that going between like 8 stories every day.
I can't either, but works for some people. Here's a question for you. So, as someone who's done the entire boot camp before, 12 weeks, what would you tell somebody who's starting out?
Definitely follow. Get down the outline. Get down and start with sort of a somewhat simple story. I mean, because it's gonna get complex no matter what. If you try to hit all the beats and like save the cat, if you hit all the right beats, that's already complex. And then trying to add like, well, I want major flashbacks and I want these 2 parallel universes of timelines to be existing at the same time. And, it's going to bog. I mean, I'm doing fantasy, but pretty mild. It's not I don't have to build the world out that much. But even with mine, it was the stumbling blocks, came with like, oh shoot, wait, do ogres really exist? Or are they going to be make-believe? Because I was like, well, some of these fantasy things are make-believe in her world.
Yeah.
Whereas some of them are, and it's like already you're getting bogged down by like the world building aspects when part of the muscle is just learning how to write a story, learning how to put the prose down, practicing those skills. And so unless you've written a book before, kind of trying to keep it simple. I mean, if the one, but then, passion plays a role too, right? So if you're really passionate about it, that'll also push you along, but there's kind of a balance. So that would be my main thing.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Even a simple story is kind of complex at this scale. At this length, even an ABC story is a lot to juggle. I think is what you were sort of saying, right? So that's why. Don't try to add frosting on frosting on frosting on frosting. I've mixed up my food and my juggling metaphors, I guess, but try not to bite off too big a meal, because it's a lot to just write a book. It's like you're spinning a lot of different plates. I need to stop picking metaphors, but just getting to the end, of like a 60,000 word book, you're balancing so many things that try to just not like it's ambitious just to write this. Try not to add complexity that doesn't need to be there. And speaking of your fantasy storyline, things in that world don't exist or aren't real. That's always kind of a funny moment, isn't it? In like a fantasy story where they're like, "Well, werewolves aren't real." It's like your friend is a fairy. What are you talking about? Like you.
Right.
Or what is it in Batman? This comes up all the time. The crooks are like, "There ain't no such thing as no Batman," and they're like, "Your boss is a crocodile. Your boss lives in a sewer. Right. You don't believe that a Batman could be real? What are you talking about?" It's anyway. I always just think that's
right.
Funny.
Like, well, there's some lore in this land, right, where there's different like just like here we have animals and elephants, right? And those could be weird creatures for somewhere else, and so it's like, I was like, well, let's just not even go there. Like, let's not go into mythology. Like, let's not build out a real complex mythological system in my fantasy world because it just
This ain't Percy Jackson.
Story. Yeah. Well, I mean, and yeah, well, and he kind of just pulled from, for the most part, already existing gods, at least. But yeah,
that's true. But he turned it into this whole, like, he has his own spin on it, and the organization
that's
of how
true.
They're like, they have like a magic summer camp for gods, and there's like the whole system of. Anyway.
That's true. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So yeah, that's my main thing. My main advice for now, and to follow the structure, unless you have like a really good thing that works, the structure that Conor gives. I mean, for me, outlining has been really helpful, and I know there's a balance. Some people dip in and go back and forth, but I have been finding that getting all of the beats worked out as much as you can before you start writing, because there's some stuff you just never know until you get into the page. For sure. And get into the voice of the author, and things will change no matter what. But getting that outline down so that the story, I mean, where you're going, and you're not going to just stop in the middle because you can't figure it out.
That's the main benefit of outlining, is it's not to like lock you into the structure. It's not like a chain around your ankles. It's there to help you finish. Like, and you can, once it's done, you can rearrange things, you can change it however you want. But a lot of people just don't finish because they don't have any structure, or they don't have any organization to what they're doing. Sorry, there's a siren outside my window right now.
I hear that.
Thank you for weighing in, Amanda.
Yep, sure. Thank you.
And now I'll move you back to the audience. Watch this. Zoop. There we go. I wish there was like a sound effect. It did. There should be different sound effects. There should be, well, first of all, if I ban somebody, it should play a toilet flushing sound, and maybe an audience going like, "Aww." And then I just want to have like a full radio DJ set up here. Okay, so we got some other introductions from other folks in the chat. We got one from Steve, who's considering adapting a screenplay he's working on into a novel. His interests are David Lynch, Tarkovsky, things like that. Yeah, so definitely more on the sort of literary side, I'm guessing. Thanks for weighing in, Steve. We have Michelle, who says she has multiple genres she's working on: romance, fantasy, horror, disaster, sci-fi, biography, gangster crime set during Prohibition. Cool. Yeah, historical. I love historical crime stuff. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with, Michelle. Thank you. We have Rebecca, who says, I have a first look deal with a UK mainstream kids lit publisher, having won a work in progress award. Congratulations. Since I won that award, I've been paralyzed with fear, and I'm trying to get back into loving my novel. So my goal is to get my novel done by the deadline the publisher has imposed on me. Oh, that is a good, yeah, for sure. You should hit that deadline if you can. Some good motivation, hopefully. And yeah, we'll try to keep people on track, keep you motivated, and falling in love with your story and falling out of love with it happens to people all the time in different ways. Some people end up hating their story halfway through every time. I think it was, there's like an anecdote about Neil Gaiman, I think it's Gaiman actually, Neil Gaiman, who, in one of his most popular series, or one of his most popular books, like 70% of the way through being done, he calls his agent and he's like, it's terrible, it's a mess, I can't finish it, I hate this, everyone's gonna hate this. And his agent was like, you say this every time. You do this literally every time. And you should like maybe just start to anticipate if that is what happens every time. Then you can prepare your counterattack early on. I've been playing too many fighting video games, so I'm always going to talk about counterattacks and stuff. But yeah, we can prepare for that feeling. And even after you fall out of love with it, it's like a marriage in a weird way, right? It's like it's not always going to have that shiny kind of honeymoon phase to it. But when you plan for that, and you plan for the luster and the magic and the shine to go away a little bit, then that can just be an important step in getting to that next stage, finishing that thing, and moving on. Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else? We have Powit, who says favorite genre: suspense thriller, archaeological. Is that a thriller? Or wait, sorry, is that a thriller genre? Archaeological thrillers? I guess it is. Is that like Dan Brown stuff? And then nothing published professionally, dabbled in lyrics, screenplay, romance, nonfiction, etc. Also a planner outliner, but feel it may be a stumbling block. That's okay. This class is all about working through that stumbling block. Oh, go ahead, Powit, if you'd like to speak.
I pushed a button by accident. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
But sure, I can answer your question, actually. Hello, everyone. So to answer your question, Conor, it's more along the lines of, I guess, kind of archaeological excavations.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of the main theme of the story, kind of like Indiana Jones. But yes, Dan
okay.
Brown is actually one of that's almost like the genre that I'm trying to write, the novel that I'm bringing to the table and wanting to complete during these sessions.
Cool.
But yeah, so world religions, art history kind of fueled my love of that genre, but I like the suspense aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
So,
you know, speculating about the future. So,
and so this would be sort of like they're kind of like pulp adventures, I guess, in a way, right? So like Tomb Raider, we
yes,
have
things like nature.
okay, so we're the Mummy. We're like digging into the ground, excavating old temples and stuff, and finding
Yes.
monsters and treasures and bad guys.
Yes.
Cool. I love it.
Really
I had no idea that was called archaeological thriller. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure. Thank you.
So I can move you back to the audience 1 second. What sound effect should it be? Should it be like a basketball slamming into the net, or should it be? I wonder what. Can I do sound effects on Discord? I'm not allowed to have this much fun teaching classes. All right, we have some more introductions from Dylan. Hi, Dylan. I've written 3 manuscripts: horror, fantasy, and sci-fi. That's right. I read your sci-fi book. Great stuff. Over the last 10 years, I've slowed down over the last couple of years, and I'm hoping we can shake off the rusty cobwebs. And you're mixing your metaphors. Cobwebs can't get rusty. And find the joy of writing again. There's your first note right there. Favorite author is Lovecraft. Great. Oh, we're reading Lovecraft today. Blake Crouch, Lucy Foley, anything mystery, light sci-fi, or horror. Thank you, Dylan. Okay, let's move forward because we have lots to get into today. So we're going to write a book in 12 weeks. Is it going to be good? No, probably not. The first drafts are never really that good, just to begin with, and you know, your first couple books are probably not going to turn out exactly like you want them to, so we should anticipate this and move beyond the idea that any individual manuscript needs to be good, except for whoever, was it Rebecca who weighed in and said she has a publisher deadline coming up? In that case, it does actually. You may have a little higher bar to clear. But when you're just writing books to improve, we're mostly looking to, we're approaching this like we're going to the gym. We're not trying to find some hidden masterpiece. We're not thinking our first ever novel is going to be a classic that's going to be a huge hit and get us published and get, you know, millions of dollars. So here's the steps. We start with logline. We move to sketchbook. We expand it to story beats, roadmap, or what we call the story beats outline. Scene cards, which is a full paragraph for every chapter in the entire book, as well as an estimate of the place, how much space it will take up. And then last, we go to pages, which is a screenwriting term. I don't think people really say go to pages when it comes to novels, but what we mean by this is move from pre-writing and planning to the actual execution phase. So let's start with our little poll. What are we writing? Weigh in the chat. Here's basically the choices. I mean, there might be, maybe you have some genre I've never heard of, like architectural thrillers. That's very cool. But these are kind of the main options, and you could see how archaeological, or what did I say, architectural? Archaeological might be a subset of thriller here, which we can see. So these are the major publishing genres in, what do we call it? Commercial fiction. Commercial being different than literary because commercial fiction fits into a genre. If what you're writing doesn't feel like it fits into any of these, then chances are it might be literary fiction, which is one of those. So like I've been saying recently, you have to kind of choose, am I going to do the best possible version of something that already exists? Or am I going to show people what's possible? And that's more what literary fiction is for, where you're going to teach us something that we may not have known you could do with language. Or you were going to blow us away with extremely, literary, lyrical, beautiful prose. Or you'll explore ideas in some brand new way that we never would have thought of to do before. And it may not be through a traditional narrative. And it may not be through what we call a narrative at all. It might be a series of anecdotes that are loosely connected. Or it might be like more like a dreamlike exploration of a topic or something like that. Whereas commercial fiction is going to have a main character that's trying to accomplish a goal. It's more like how we think of movie stories, right? Where this is mass market entertainment that is meant to be enjoyed by as many people as possible. Obviously, the genres are going to have different distinctions and different fan bases and different sizes of fan base. If you're writing anything besides romance, you're not writing in the most popular genre, because that is the most popular genre of published work. Romance is the top-selling of all of these that you see here. But that's not to say that you should do that just because you're going to make money at it. You should pick the thing that you read and that you like. So, what genres are we writing for the class? Feel free to tell us. Or maybe someone has a question about one of these, and you're, of course, free to ask that right now if you'd like. Come on up, Amber.
Can you hear me?
I hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, awesome. The mic's working. Okay. So, I'm kind of a very specific genre, as in an age group. I'm writing teen, which is like a brand new genre coming out. So it's the upper end of middle grade, the lower end of YA, which is what the publisher was looking for with the deal. But I'm also like a cross genre, so I'm a mystery sci-fi, and I never know how to explain it because I view my main genre as mystery and the setting is sci-fi. But when I tell people I'm writing sci-fi, the expectation is that I'm writing like, Star Trek or like, real deep like sci-fi, whereas it's more like it's a mystery in a prison. The prison just happens to be set on Titan. Do you know what I mean? It's sure. Like the mystery to me is the main my main thing. It's just that the setting is like a spaceship or an off-world prison or things like that. So I'd never really know, because mystery sci-fi sounds weird. Sounds like I should be saying.
I think it sounds first. Cool. Personally, I think that sounds great.
Oh, really?
But, yeah. But yeah, this is genres are about like marketing for the most part. So you're kind of by picking the genre you present it as. You know this. You're already in publishing, but this is how they decide where they put it in the store. So like if you're framing something primarily as a mystery, then it would be shelved with mystery as opposed to being shelved with all the sci-fi. So I think that you can definitely just pitch something as mystery and then explain how it takes place in a sci-fi setting. I can see how people would maybe have that expectation when they hear sci-fi. They think, okay, this is going to have the what I'm looking for in a sci-fi book, which is often deeper exploration of a world or of like technological ideas or things like that. It sounds like what you're writing would be classified as soft sci-fi, though, wherein it's not really about.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, so yeah, we have that distinction between hard and soft, where hard is going to be about building a really detailed world that has consistent rules and physics and maybe different aliens or different creatures to it, things like that. Whereas soft sci-fi is going to be, sounds like more what you're doing, where we are using it as a setting, or maybe using elements of sci-fi, but we're not necessarily deep diving into sci-fi ideas or terminology or things that we would in a straight sci-fi book. So maybe by pitching it as mystery in a soft sci-fi setting, maybe that would sort of key people into what you're doing a little more.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for weighing in. Let's see, we have a few more. We have Carmen writing dark fantasy. Awesome. Powit's writing suspense thriller. Great. So hopefully we're all reading these things and you know what is expected of this genre, especially for something like mystery, which has really clear rules to it. Amber just mentioned she's writing a mystery, and I think we know, as readers of mystery will know, you have to kind of play fair. We can't cheat the audience by having the reveal be something that we have no way of figuring out on our own. You have to actually play fair in mystery and give all the relevant information to the audience so that they can sort of try to solve it alongside the characters, or maybe ideally figure out how to figure out the mystery before the characters do. So there's different genres have different rules. Romance, the characters are going to end up together. The leads are going to end up together by the end. It's going to be about them falling in love and the trials and tribulations that they go through in making that relationship work. But ultimately, the conceit is that they're made for each other. They are going to end up happy together. There are different, there are nuances to that, and you should just be a wide reader of your genre so that you know the differences. And like if I'm going to tug the rug out at the end, and I'm going to have a surprise sad ending. Well, first of all, romance readers are going to be really upset by that for the most part, and you should know that you're going to do that on purpose and know what the specific effect of that is. Okay, so all these genres have their own rules, and you can play with those and adjust those and maybe take advantage of the fact that people expect one thing and then give them something else that's even better. That's something I've referred to before as the kind of Oreo pizza approach to storytelling, where imagine the pizza guy shows up at your house and he's like, sorry, we're all out of pizza. And you're like, oh no. And then he opens a pizza box and there's an Oreo pizza inside. And you're like, what? I didn't even know there could be a pizza made of Oreos with icing instead of marinara and with cookie crumbs instead of crust and whole Oreos instead of pepperonis. It's because you've sort of promised one thing and then you have subverted our expectations, given us something better. So you can always approach your genre like that. You can say, like, I'm going to start it this way, but then when people expect this to happen, I'm going to turn it on its head and really challenge their expectations and sidestep what they think and keep them guessing. Some genres like mystery and thriller are really based on you keeping us guessing, and in fact that's kind of part of the promise, is that we're going to be surprised and that our expectations will be constantly challenged, and we're never quite going to know what's going to happen next. Because one of these key tenets of core elements of storytelling is surprise. Like, there needs to be constant surprise. Or if we know what's going to happen and everything's unfolding in the exact way that we think it will, you're going to lose people, and it's just not interesting to us in the same way. Okay, so hopefully we all know what genre we're writing, and can choose that if you've not yet chosen that, and start digging deeper into the other entries in that genre to figure out what has been done before, what are people tired of, what would people like to see more of. You can join message boards like Reddit message boards for your genre and see threads almost every day when people will be like, what fantasy tropes are you sick of? What sci-fi would you love to see more of? What blank would you like to see more of, or what would you like to see less of? Are really, really common topics on message boards. Excuse me. Like Reddit. So I would sign up, join Reddit /sci-fi, fantasy, horror, romance, whatever it is, and join those communities and see what people are talking about and see what terminology those groups use. I mean, some of those genres have their own phrases or like acronyms or initialisms that they use, like HFN, which stands for happily for now ending, as opposed to HEE, which is happily ever after. These are different terms in the romance writing community that they all know and can kind of interact with. Or what about enemies to lovers? Do you guys know this one? This is all the rage right now. Who wants to explain what is enemies to lovers? Hi, Nasha. Did you mean to become a speaker, Nacha?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to mention a book I read recently called How to